Hey, this is Tony from the Cold Case Project, where we focus on unsolved cases across the United States. Our mission is to bring attention to these unresolved mysteries that need your help. All the information we cover in these cases is readily available on the internet, but we rewrite and repurpose it for the purpose of these videos. Our goal is to spread the word about the thousands of unsolved cold cases still out there. Thank you for watching. If you want to help shed light on these cases, make sure to like and subscribe for more content. Your support can make a difference.
On the cold morning of March 6, 1983, in Mansfield, Massachusetts, a suburb of Boston, a man named Joseph ventured out into the freezing weather to collect bottles along Interstate 95. Around 9 a.m., he met up with a friend, and the two decided to rummage through trash barrels at a nearby rest stop. They split up, with Joseph taking the left side and his friend taking the right. As Joseph reached into the first barrel, he pulled out a heavy brown plastic garbage bag. Excited by the weight, thinking it might contain a bounty of bottles, he tore it open, only to be met with a horrifying sight. Inside the bag was a tan corduroy jacket spattered with blood. The scent of expensive perfume wafted up from the jacket, creating a jarring contrast between the luxurious fragrance and the gruesome discovery. The jacket was wrapped around something hard and lumpy. As Joseph peeled back the layers, he found a man's blood-stained blue shirt and a small 2.5-pound sledgehammer, also covered in blood. Stuck to the blood on the hammer was a long strand of dark hair. Joseph called his friend over, unsure of what to do. Should they call the police? His friend, however, was hesitant. "We need to stay out of whatever this is," he said. "It's not like we found a body. Plus, it might not even be blood." Reluctantly, Joseph agreed, and they put the bag back in the trash can, determined to move on and not get involved. But Joseph couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. Later that day, he called the police. State Trooper Paul Andrew was dispatched to investigate. When he examined the contents of the trash bag, he immediately recognized the blood as fresh, likely from the night before. He collected the items and sent them to the state crime lab for testing while he began looking into any recent crimes in the area that might be connected, assaults, homicides, or missing persons. At first, nothing stood out. But about a week later, Trooper Landry heard about a missing person case from a newscast. He began calling major news stations in the Boston area and neighboring Rhode Island, trying to track down the report. Eventually, he learned that a man named Junior had reported his 21-year-old girlfriend, Robin Benedict, missing on March 7, 1983. Robin had last been seen on March 5th, when she left to visit someone in Sharon, Massachusetts, just 5 minutes away from the rest stop where the trash bag was found. Robin had been wearing a tan jacket when she disappeared, matching the one found in the bag. Trooper Landry's interest was piqued. Robin Benedict was a sex worker in Boston, and Junior was her boyfriend, or possibly more. Junior had a criminal history that included unarmed robbery and receiving stolen credit cards. He also co-owned a hair salon rumored to be a meeting place for traffickers. Interestingly, Junior wasn't the first to report Robin missing. His ex, the mother of his son, had reported her missing on March 6th, the same day the trash bag was found, because Robin had failed to show up for her son's birthday party. Junior reported her missing 2 days later, and her parents filed their own report 3 days after that. Trooper Landry also learned that Junior had hired private investigators to track Robin down, before he even reported her missing to the police. The PIs told Trooper Landry that Junior suspected a client of Robin's, a man who had become obsessed with her in recent months, might be involved in her disappearance. That man was Dr. William Douglas, a 41-year-old anatomy professor at Tufts Medical School. Dr. Douglas's history with Robin was deeply troubling. They had met in the spring of 1982 at a bar in Boston's Combat Zone, an area known for sex work. Douglas quickly became a regular client, paying Robin for more and more of her time. He began rearranging his work schedule to take her to plays, movies, and concerts. He sent her cards and letters almost daily, called her incessantly, and even bought her an answering machine for her birthday so she wouldn't miss his messages. He even put her on the payroll at Tufts as a research assistant, though no one at the university ever recalled seeing her in the lab. Douglas's obsession grew to the point where he would park outside Robin's apartment, watching her comings and goings. Police began showing up at her apartment just as she brought clients home, as if someone was trying to get her caught. Junior suspected that Douglas had orchestrated these incidents, even calling the police on himself once to play the hero and gain Robin's trust. By early 1983, Robin had grown tired of Douglas's behavior and tried to end their relationship. On March 2nd, she called Douglas's wife, Nancy, and told her she wanted Douglas to stop contacting her. But Douglas didn't stop. On the day of her disappearance, March 5th, he called her 12 times. That night, Robin left her apartment to meet Douglas at his home in Sharon, Massachusetts. She was never seen again. The discovery of the trash bag with the blood-stained items on March 6th raised immediate suspicions. Robin's father identified the tan jacket as hers, and the scent of her perfume still clung to it. Trooper Landry's investigation led him to Douglas, who was already under scrutiny for embezzling $67,000 from Tufts University, money he had allegedly spent on Robin. When police searched Douglas's home on March 20th, they found a trove of incriminating evidence: Robin's pocketbook, credit cards, personal phone book, and even her flute. They also found a blood-stained jacket with what appeared to be human tissue in the pocket. In July, Robin's blood-stained car was found abandoned near Penn Station in New York City. Douglas was charged with first-degree murder in October 1983. On the morning his trial was set to begin in April 1984, he pleaded guilty to manslaughter and admitted to beating Robin to death with a hammer in his home on the night of March 5th. He claimed he had placed her body in a dumpster in Rhode Island, but despite extensive searches, her remains were never found. Douglas was sentenced to 18 to 20 years in prison for manslaughter and 5 years for embezzlement, to be served concurrently. He was released after serving just 8.5 years. Robin's family, devastated by her loss and the lack of closure, continued to search for answers. Douglas died in 2015, taking the truth about what happened to Robin Benedict to his grave. Robin's story is one of obsession, manipulation, and tragedy. A young woman with dreams of a better life, she became entangled in a web of control and violence. Joseph Estuchos disappeared on April 1st, 1992. It remains one of the most perplexing mysteries in Ipswich, Massachusetts. A successful property manager and businessman, Estucho was last seen at Brown Square in Ipswich at 9:30 a.m. that day. He had planned to collect rent from 2 tenants, a routine task for the 52-year-old entrepreneur. However, he never returned home, and neither he nor his distinctive 1987 Cadillac Roadster, blue with a white roof and bearing the license plate numbered 993 KVEZ, were seen again for weeks. On April 20th, 1992, Estucho's Cadillac was discovered abandoned near a landfill in Middleton, Massachusetts, approximately 15 miles from Ipswich. The car was in poor condition. Its windows were broken, the ignition had been damaged, and the tires were caked with mud. Inside the vehicle, investigators found only Estucho's appointment book, his coat, and his hat. There was no sign of Estucho himself, and the discovery of the car raised more questions than answers. How had the vehicle ended up in Middleton? Who had driven it there? And, most importantly, what had happened to Joseph Estucho? The mystery deepened when investigators looked into Estucho's life in the months leading up to his disappearance. In February 1992, just 2 months before he vanished, Estucho had reported a disturbing incident to the police. Someone had fired a .22 caliber bullet into the front door frame of his home on Rubley Road in Wenham, Massachusetts, where he lived with his wife. Estucho had been home at the time of the shooting, which occurred around 11 p.m., but he had gone to bed afterward and only reported the incident the following day. The shooter was never identified, and it remains unclear whether this event was connected to Estucho's disappearance. Was it a random act of vandalism, or was it a targeted threat? In the days following Estucho's disappearance, there was a possible sighting of him at Logan Airport in Boston. Someone who knew Esto claimed to have seen him boarding a plane bound for Orlando, Florida. However, airport records showed no evidence that Esto had flown out that day, casting doubt on the reliability of the sighting. Despite this, the possibility that Esto had fled to Florida persisted. He owned rental property in the state, and there were unconfirmed reports that he may have worked at a bakery in Peabody, Massachusetts, and lived in Holiday, Florida, at some point in the mid-1990s. None of these leads were ever substantiated, leaving investigators with little to go on. Esto's personal and financial life added further complexity to the case. A self-made man, he had built a successful career as a property manager and was reportedly quite wealthy. He had no significant debts, and no one owed him a substantial amount of money. His wife, with whom he shared a home on Rubley Road in Wenham, was cooperative with investigators but had no insights into what might have happened to her husband. The lack of financial motives or personal conflicts made it difficult for authorities to pinpoint a reason for his disappearance. Over the years, the case has remained open, but no arrests have been made and no definitive answers have emerged. The discovery of Esto's abandoned car, the mysterious shooting at his home, and the unconfirmed sightings have all contributed to a web of theories and speculation. Was Esto the victim of foul play? Did he choose to disappear voluntarily, leaving behind his life and business? Or was there another explanation for his sudden vanishing? Joseph Esto's fate remains a mystery, and his story stands as one of Massachusetts' most enduring unsolved cases. Eleanor Carnevale was last seen in Lowell, Massachusetts on August 6, 1969. At the time of her disappearance, she was living with her mother in the 30 block of Royal Street. She had moved into her mother's home on August 1st, leaving behind her husband and 2 young children at their residence in the 10 block of Cambridge Street in Chelmsford. Despite her relocation, she left all of her clothing and personal belongings behind. She has never been heard from again. 2 days after Carnevale's disappearance, her recently purchased 1966 sedan was found abandoned in the parking lot of St. John's Hospital in Lowell. The vehicle had reportedly been sitting there for days. The keys were still in the ignition, and inside the car, police found Carnevale's purse and wallet, which contained only $4. Carnevale vanished less than a week after receiving a $3,500 settlement from a car accident. She spent the majority of the money in the days leading up to her disappearance, including purchasing her new car for $1,750. However, she left behind the remaining $400 at home. Carnevale was described as a devoted mother who maintained regular visits with her children even after she had separated from her husband and moved out of their home. Following the separation, she began dating other men, one of whom was questioned by police and asked to take a polygraph test, which he passed. Carnevale was known to seek help and treatment from professionals, and her history suggested she often turned to others for guidance during difficult times. According to Carnevale's husband, she called him on the evening of August 18th, 12 days after her disappearance. During the conversation, she reportedly stated she was staying at a hotel in downtown Boston, Massachusetts. However, police were unable to verify this claim, and no records confirmed her presence at any hotel in the city. A friend of Carnevale suggested she may have left voluntarily. According to the friend, Carnevale had expressed feelings of discouragement and had mentioned a desire to move to either California or Ohio. However, her family strongly disputed this idea, believing she would never have willingly abandoned her children. Despite extensive investigations, no trace of Carnevale has ever been found. Authorities have considered multiple theories, including the possibility that she may have left of her own accord or met with foul play. The Massachusetts State Police continue to investigate Carnevale's disappearance, hoping that new leads or advancements in technology may eventually shed light on what happened to her. Paul Alwart vanished without a trace on March 31, 1978, in Falmouth, Massachusetts. His disappearance occurred under mysterious and troubling circumstances, as he was set to testify before a grand jury against his employer, Melvin R. Rain Sr., the following day. Paul, who was under the care of the Massachusetts Department of Youth Services, was last seen boarding a ferry bound for Martha's Vineyard, where some of his relatives resided. A police officer had escorted him to the ferry, but Paul never arrived at his destination and has not been heard from since. His disappearance remains unsolved, and his fate is a haunting mystery. Melvin Rain Sr., the man Paul was supposed to testify against, was a prominent figure in Falmouth, known for running a successful trash-hauling business called 5 Star Enterprises. Despite his professional success, Melvin had a long and troubling history with law enforcement. He was considered the prime suspect in the disappearance of his wife, Wanda Rain, who vanished in March 1971 and has never been found. Wanda's case remains open, and she is presumed dead. The Rain family's history is riddled with violence and tragedy. In 1972, 18-year-old Shirley M. Souza, the family's babysitter, moved into the Rain household. Shirley's life became intertwined with the Rainists in ways that would later prove fatal. That same year, one of Shirley's former boyfriends, 16-year-old Charles Jeffrey Flanagan, was found shot to death in a bog located just across the street from the Rain home. Shirley was one of the last people to see Flanagan alive, and Melvin emerged as a suspect in his murder. However, no charges were ever filed in connection with Flanagan's death, leaving the case unresolved. The year 1978 proved to be particularly tumultuous for the Rain family and those connected to them. In addition to Paul Alwort's disappearance, John Busby, a police officer who had previously clashed with the Rainists, was shot twice in the face while on his way to work. Busby survived the attack, and Melvin was immediately suspected of orchestrating the shooting. However, investigators were unable to gather enough evidence to charge him at the time. Melvin's legal troubles continued when he was later charged with rigging bids to secure the city contract for 5 Star Enterprises. His business partner testified against him, but Melvin was acquitted in 1985. Melvin's life took a dramatic turn in 2001 when he was committed to Taunton State Hospital after threatening to shoot a woman. During his evaluation, he was diagnosed with Pick's disease, a rare form of dementia that causes personality changes, poor judgment, forgetfulness, and social ineptitude. With Melvin incapacitated, Shirley took over the operations of 5 Star Enterprises. However, her newfound role would soon place her in the crosshairs of a bitter family dispute. In 2002, Melvin's 2 sons, Todd and Melvin Jr., came forward with shocking allegations. They told police that their father and their uncle, John Rain, were responsible for the 1978 shooting of John Busby. When questioned in 2003, John Rain admitted that he had driven the car while Melvin fired shots at Busby from the open window. John also revealed that Shirley had been present in the vehicle during the shooting. Despite these admissions, no charges were filed in the case, as the statute of limitations had expired. John also implicated Melvin in the murder of Charles Flanagan, but again, no charges were brought due to Melvin's deteriorating mental state. Melvin Rain Sr. passed away in November 2013 at the age of 74, leaving behind a legacy of unresolved crimes and unanswered questions. Shirley's life took a tragic turn in May 2005 when she was shot to death in her garage. At the time of her murder, she was embroiled in a bitter legal battle with her stepsons, Todd and Melvin Jr., over Melvin's estate. Melvin had divorced Wanda in 1997 and married Shirley in 1999 after more than 2 decades of living together. In 2001, he had written a will that disinherited his sons and left his business and property to Shirley. Todd and Melvin Jr. contested the will, claiming their father was mentally incompetent when he drafted it and accusing Shirley of taking advantage of him. Shirley, fearing for her life, reportedly told friends that if anything happened to her, her stepsons were likely responsible. Her murder occurred just days before the case was set to go to trial. Investigators concluded that Shirley had been ambushed by someone familiar with her daily routine. In December 2011, John Rams Jr. was charged with her murder. At the time of his indictment, Rams was already serving time in prison for stealing documents from Shirley's home. However, he was acquitted of the murder charges in August 2014, leaving Shirley's case unsolved. The stories of Paul Alward, Wanda Rain, Charles Flanagan, John Busby, and Shirley Souza are all intertwined with the dark and violent history of the Rain family. Despite numerous investigations and allegations, many of these cases remain unresolved, leaving families and communities searching for answers. The disappearances of Paul and Wanda, the murders of Flanagan and Shirley, and the attempted murder of Busby paint a chilling picture of a family entangled in a web of crime, suspicion, and tragedy. To this day, the truth behind these events remains elusive. On the morning of September 30th, 1978, 7-year-old Andrew Amato was playing in the woods behind the Ash Street Trailer Park in Webster, Massachusetts, with his 7-year-old sister and their 6-year-old cousin. The children had been explicitly told not to play in the woods, but they had sneaked away to explore the area anyway. The day started like any other, filled with the innocent adventures of childhood, but it would end in a mystery that remains unsolved to this day. At some point during their play, Andrew and his cousin ventured deeper into the woods, leaving his sister behind. As they explored, Andrew stumbled and injured himself. In the commotion, he dropped and lost his favorite toy, which upset him deeply. He began crying and running in circles, refusing to leave without the toy. His cousin, realizing they needed help, told Andrew to stay put and ran back to their family's home on Richards Avenue to get assistance. It was approximately 10:30 a.m. when the cousin left Andrew alone in the woods. By the time the cousin returned with help, Andrew was gone. Despite an extensive search that lasted 10 days and involved the National Guard, no trace of the little boy was ever found. The search covered the dense woods, nearby roads, and surrounding areas, but no clues emerged to explain his disappearance. Andrew had vanished without a trace, leaving his family and the community in shock and despair. The woods where Andrew disappeared were only about 50 yards away from Route 52, which is now part of Interstate 395. Some investigators and community members theorized that Andrew might have wandered out of the woods and onto the road, where he could have been picked up by a passing motorist. Webster, Massachusetts, is located near the Connecticut border and is only a 10 to 15-minute drive from Rhode Island, making it a plausible scenario that someone passing through the area could have taken him. However, no evidence has ever surfaced to support this theory. In June 1998, nearly 20 years after Andrew's disappearance, authorities excavated a wooded area off Minebrook Road, approximately 5 miles from where he was last seen. Investigators had received information that evidence related to his case might be buried in the forest. Despite their efforts, the search yielded no materials connected to Andrew's disappearance, leaving the case as cold as ever. In December 2001, a chilling discovery was made in Montana that briefly reignited interest in Andrew's case. Among the possessions of Nathaniel Barjona, a convicted child predator whose given name was David P. Brown, authorities found a handwritten list of names titled Lake Webster. Barjona had grown up in Dudley, Massachusetts, not far from Webster, and had a history of violent crimes against children. In 1977, he had been convicted of the abductions and attempted murders of 2 Massachusetts boys. He was also charged with the 1996 murder of Zachary Ramsey in Montana, though the charges were dropped due to insufficient evidence. Barjona was named as a possible suspect in other missing children cases, including the 1973 disappearance of Janice Pocket in Connecticut and the 1997 disappearance of Amanda Gallion in Wyoming. However, he was never charged in connection with these cases. Barjona was ultimately convicted of child molestation in Montana in February 2002 and died in prison in April 2008 at the age of 51. Despite the discovery of the Lake Webster list, investigators were unable to tie Barjona directly to Andrew's disappearance. Some news reports incorrectly stated that Andrew's name appeared on the list, but this was later debunked. Bar Jonah's connection to the case remains speculative, and no concrete evidence has ever linked him to Andrew's fate. In November 2003, another lead emerged when a man, whose identity has never been publicly disclosed, confessed to Andrew's murder in 1999. The man had died of lung cancer shortly after making the confession, and his family waited 4 years to report it to the police. Acting on the information provided in the confession, authorities excavated a rural area near Burrillville, Rhode Island, but found nothing of interest. The lead ultimately went nowhere, leaving investigators with yet another dead end. Andrew Amato's disappearance remains one of Massachusetts' most haunting unsolved mysteries. Foul play is strongly suspected, but no arrests have ever been made, and no definitive answers have been found. For now, the case remains open, a reminder of a little boy who vanished into thin air on a September morning in 1978. Lynn Burdick's disappearance from Florida, Massachusetts, on April 17, 1982, remains one of the most haunting unsolved mysteries in the region. At just 18 years old, Lynn was a bright, responsible, and caring young woman who had her whole life ahead of her. She was a senior at McCann Vocational Technical High School, excelling academically and set to graduate with high honors. Lynn was deeply devoted to her family, particularly her mother, who suffered from a chronic illness. She worked part-time at the Barefoot Peddler, a small convenience store owned by her cousin, to help support her family and save money for college. On the evening of her disappearance, Lynn was working alone at the store, a rare occurrence as she typically worked alongside her best friend. Around 8 p.m., her cousin called to check on her. During the conversation, Lynn mentioned it had been a slow night due to the rainy weather. Suddenly, her cousin heard the sound of the store's doorbell, indicating a customer had entered. Lynn told her cousin she had to hang up to attend to the customer and promised to call back after closing the store at 9 p.m. That was the last time anyone heard from Lynn. At 8:30 p.m., Lynn's mother tried calling the store but got no answer. She assumed Lynn was busy with a customer and didn't think much of it. However, around 8:40 p.m., a local customer entered the store and found it empty. The door was open. Lynn's open book and half-finished soda were still on the counter, but her jacket and purse were missing. The cash register was short $187, though additional money hidden under the counter remained untouched. This detail suggested the intruder was unfamiliar with the store's layout, ruling out the possibility of an inside job. Lynn's family immediately contacted the police, and a massive search ensued. The community rallied together, raising a $2,500 reward for information leading to Lynn's whereabouts. Despite extensive ground and air searches of Florida and nearby towns, no trace of Lynn was found. The investigation quickly focused on the possibility of abduction, as there was no evidence to suggest Lynn had left voluntarily. She had no known boyfriend, no history of running away, and was deeply committed to her family and responsibilities. A critical lead emerged when investigators learned of an attempted abduction that had occurred just 14 miles away in Williamstown, Massachusetts, only 40 minutes before Lynn disappeared. A college student had been approached by a man who tried to force her into his vehicle. She managed to escape and reported the incident to police. The suspect was described as a white male, approximately 5 feet 7 inches, and would now be around 70 years old. Composite sketches of the suspect were created, both as he appeared in 1982 and as he might look today. Authorities believe this individual may have ties to Vermont, though the exact connection remains unclear. The timing and proximity of the two incidents led investigators to suspect the same man may have been involved in both cases. A police officer reported seeing a vehicle matching the suspect description traveling toward Florida on Route 2 shortly after the attempted abduction in Williamstown. The Barefoot Peddler was located on Route 2, placing the suspect near Lynn's location at the time of her disappearance. Despite this lead, the suspect was never identified or apprehended. In 1995, Lynn's father received an anonymous letter postmarked for Boston. The writer claimed that Lynn had been abducted and murdered by a man in North Adams, Massachusetts. Authorities were familiar with the suspect named in the letter and interviewed him extensively, but no evidence was found to link him to Lynn's disappearance. The letter's author remains unidentified, and it's unclear whether the note was a genuine tip or a cruel hoax. Over the years, Lynn's family has never given up hope of finding answers. Her parents passed away without ever learning what happened to their daughter, her mother in 1990 and her father in 2012. However, Lynn's siblings and extended family continue to fight for justice. They've participated in media interviews, created a Facebook page called Finding Lynn Burdick, and launched fundraising campaigns for billboards to raise awareness about her case. In recent years, the Berkshire District Attorney's Office and the Massachusetts State Police have renewed efforts to solve Lynn's case. As part of their initiative to address unresolved homicides, they distributed decks of playing cards featuring information about Lynn's disappearance throughout the state prison system, hoping to generate new leads. In August 2022, authorities released updated composite sketches of the suspect and appealed to the public for information. Lynn's case remains open and unsolved. If you have any information about Lynn Burdick's disappearance, please contact the Berkshire State Police Detective Unit at 413-499-1112 or email the Massachusetts State Police. Sandra Crespo was last seen in Hanson, Massachusetts on August 7, 2019. Her disappearance remains one of the most baffling missing persons cases in the area, as she seemed to have vanished without a trace, leaving behind her home, personal belongings, and most disturbingly, her beloved dog. Despite extensive searches and ongoing investigations, there's been no sign of Sandra since that day, and the circumstances surrounding her disappearance remain deeply unsettling. On the day she was last seen, Sandra's car was in the repair shop. Her son-in-law had been assisting her with transportation that day, driving her to a local Cumberland Farms convenience store, where she purchased cigarettes. After making the purchase, he dropped her off at her home on Spofford Avenue around 5 p.m. That was the last confirmed sighting of Sandra Crespo. Sandra had previously given her daughter, Lena McMahon, as a contact number to the mechanic working on her car. The following day, August 8th, the mechanic called McMahon to inform her of the necessary repairs. When McMahon tried to call her mother to relay the information, she received no answer. Initially, she wasn't too alarmed, but as she continued calling multiple times without a response, her concern grew. Sandra had also been scheduled to watch her daughter's 3 sons that day, and her failure to follow through with this plan was highly uncharacteristic. Growing more anxious, McMahon decided to go to Sandra's house to check on her. When McMahon arrived at her mother's house, what she found only deepened her concern. The back door was unlocked, yet there were no signs of forced entry or a struggle. The air conditioning and lights were still on, suggesting that Sandra had left suddenly or had been interrupted in her daily routine. Her purse and shoes were missing, which might indicate that she had stepped out voluntarily, but there was no sign of where she might have gone. Her dog was still inside the house, left without food or water, something that was highly unusual for Sandra, as she was known to be extremely attentive to her pet's needs. Inside the house, everything appeared relatively normal, but a few things stood out. In the refrigerator, there was a neatly cut-up watermelon, prepared and ready for her grandchildren to eat. This indicated that Sandra had fully expected to see them and had made plans for their visit. Additionally, her bed showed peculiar signs of disturbance. The bed boards had been taken off, and it seemed as though someone had lifted up the mattress. It is unclear whether this was related to her disappearance or if there was another explanation for it. One of the most perplexing aspects of Sandra's case is the complete lack of activity following her disappearance. She did not own a computer or a cell phone, meaning that there were no digital footprints to track her movements or potential communications. Furthermore, since the day she vanished, there has been absolutely no activity on her bank accounts. It is as if she simply ceased to exist after August 7th, 2019. Sandra had only recently moved to Hanson from the Huffsneck area of Quincy, Massachusetts, having been there for just 3 months before she went missing. There were no known medical issues that could have contributed to her disappearance, nor did she have a history of leaving unexpectedly or cutting off communication with loved ones. Her daughter, Lena McMahon, has been one of the strongest voices advocating for answers in her mother's case. She has consistently expressed her belief that Sandra met with foul play and that someone knows what happened to her. Despite McMahon's efforts, police have remained uncertain about what exactly happened to Sandra. With no physical evidence, no witnesses coming forward, and no leads to follow, the case has stalled, leaving her family in anguish and the community baffled. Authorities have conducted multiple searches of Sandra's home and surrounding areas, but nothing of significance has been found. Investigators have not publicly identified any persons of interest in the case. Family members, including McMahon, have remained active in spreading awareness about Sandra's disappearance, hoping that someone, somewhere, may have information that could lead to answers. The disappearance of Sandra Crispo remains an open and unsolved case. Was she the victim of a crime? Did she leave voluntarily, and if so, why? The lack of answers only deepens the heartbreak for her loved ones, who continue to seek closure and justice. Anyone with information about Sandra Crispo's disappearance is urged to contact local authorities.